Here we are, guys. Welcome to you, and welcome to all of you sitting behind the screen. We're excited.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
At least I am. And I think we're pretty well prepared. I know that more than 100 people have signed up for this show, and that tells us that we are definitely on to something that has some weight to it. And speaking of weight, I would like to start with you guys. Rune, you're here today because you have quite a lot of knowledge in digital product launches, and you've dealt with a lot of companies who's come to you over the past couple of years talking about product launches, and our job in CAD design has been to help these guys launch the product on time.
Yeah.
And you've been with CAD design for 20 years?
20 years, yeah.
Oh my God.
And hopefully during this talk we'll be able to inspire our audience to improve on future product launches, embracing the digital opportunities.
It's perfect. It's good to have you here, definitely. You know what you talk about,
and
you will be kind of having that look from the agency side, whether it's us or someone else, what's important and what should you have your focus on.
Exactly.
And it's weird with you because it's kind of the same and then not at all. The last 20 years you haven't been spent in this company. You've actually worked with a lot of furniture companies. You've been handling product management, development, marketing and sales.
Correct.
So you know your way around product launches as well, I hope.
Yeah, you could say that. I have a view from the other side of the table.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's good. And it's great to have you here as well.
Thank you.
I think we should get started.
Let's kick it.
My job is the easy one today because I just have to ask the questions and you guys have to deliver like really, really good advice.
We'll see what we can do.
We'll do our best.
I'll start off by maybe diving into something that I experienced a couple of years ago. I worked at a different company. My job was to launch a product. I was very excited about this. It was a huge launch. A lot of money was set aside to it. And we were very excited. And it was that mixed feeling of hate and love. With product launches, this was exactly the same. More love definitely than hate. But in the end, we kind of, when we wanted to go online, it felt like it wasn't all the excitement and all the energy and money we put into it. I couldn't see that when we actually launched the product. And I'm still not sure why that happened. Why do product launches fail?
Well, I think, as you said, is that a lot of marketing teams might have a bit of a love-hate relationship with it, because on one hand, there's a lot of excitement, and an incredible amount of work. But on the other hand, there can be a lot of stress, a lot of sleepless nights over it, because there's so many expectations. There's a lot of investment on behalf of the company in new product development. Yeah. And of course, marketing is at the visible end of the spectrum. They're the ones responsible for producing this mountain of content, and you can get a lot of glory when it goes right.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you are dependent on a lot of stakeholders internally who also have to deliver.
Exactly.
And I think one of the key things that can go wrong is either that a product launch can get delayed because of certain circumstances, or that you are committed to a deadline, in which case you just slightly run out of time and you can't quite produce all of the assets that you originally wanted.
I guess that makes sense if you have the internal delays, but you still have a fixed deadline.
Absolutely.
That has to go wrong at some point.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that gives me an idea of what went wrong back then, and I'm sure that's some of the topics that we'll need to dive into today, and that's what we will be focusing on, I guess. Good. All right. So we know it's an issue, and I guess that delays will probably put pressure on you as well, Rune, when people come to you and say, could you help us? We don't have a lot of time. We barely have a product, but now we need to go in a digital way. You've experienced that?
Yeah, indeed. Of course, the pressure from the marketing department, in the end, it will just be forwarded to the agency, potentially helping creating the content. But I would say, though, that diving into 3D digitalization, you will be helped a lot, because you can avoid some of the physical constraints about having a physical sample of your product, just as an example.
And let's talk about that. What are some of the constraints? What could go wrong if you have a physical product? What often goes wrong? Any of you guys know that? Experience that?
I think, I think one of the things is that you are dependent, as Rune just said, on some physical prototypes arriving, perhaps for a photo shoot. or samples for sales samples. And today, especially today, there are some very serious supply chain bottlenecks right now. We know that during COVID, everyone switched their buying habits from services to physical products. And this has had a huge knock-on effect on the supply chain. We know now, for example, I think I read the other day that the cost of sending a 40-foot container from China to the US, I think 2 years ago it was around $1,300, $1,300, and today it's $20,000. So an incredible increase. And at the same time, the time.
That's almost double the price?
No, it's like 7 or 8.
13 to 20?
Yeah.
Wow, okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So 1,300
yes,
to 20,000.
Yes, got it.
And at the same time, the time that is required door to door to ship might have gone from something like 40 days to like 70 days today. So this has put an incredible amount of pressure on, marketing teams who may be dependent on receiving physical samples. So I think that is something that potentially digitalization can help out with.
All right. Yeah, and I guess that it's not just marketing, it's the whole company when stuff are delayed. But if you have a fixed deadline, you kind of need to go to market anyways, and then hoping that the product might arrive just in time. That's how I see it. All right, good. What other stuff could go wrong? That was more physically on the actual products. Anything else that might go wrong in this process that we can learn from, or maybe stuff you've experienced?
I think one of the key things that you have to look at when you are launching a product is the rest of the organization. I mentioned that we're very dependent in a product launch on a whole number of internal stakeholders, whether those are engineers or developers or people in the purchasing department or production, the people responsible for producing the goods or for making sure that they get delivered on time, or whether it's people who are responsible for populating databases with data. There's a lot of people that you're dependent on. And I think that where that can often go wrong is that it's often seen as marketing's responsibility to launch the product. But one of the smartest things that a marketing manager can actually do is to transfer the responsibility onto a cross-functional, multidisciplinary organization. So that might mean right at the very beginning of the project, calling in all of the key stakeholders who are going to have an impact and will contribute to the success of the product launch, and making them understand how they can contribute to the success, but also making them understand the codependencies, how all of these different tasks interlock.
And that makes perfectly sense. Again, looking at the different departments, they tend to let go. Once they've delivered the product, they will let go. And if they're a bit delayed, it's not that important because the product won't be launched until 6-9 months.
Exactly.
But it is actually quite important.
Incredibly important. And I think the critical thing there is what you might call the handshakes between departments. So you want to break down the siloization that happens in organization and create these really good handshakes between the departments so that it's very clear expectations of what should be done and when it should be done. So securing that commitment early on from your internal stakeholders, your collaborators, if you like, and creating a cross-organizational team that takes joint responsibility for the success of the product launch is key.
And I was just thinking, of course, that makes perfectly sense, and that has to have a huge influence on the work that you might be doing later on if that organization is not set right.
Definitely.
I mean, if the product's not done, you might even in a digital world spend time redoing the product, or
of course, any lack of alignment at an earlier stage will have an impact, because we start to visualize. That means that everything becomes visible, and suddenly something will appear, and project paused, going back, and you can tell that every hour spent on process and changes means 1 hour less spent on creativity and great content creation. So, definitely they have an impact. It'll just be pushed forward, the challenge.
So you have actually more time to improve the visualizations, not just on the actual finish, but also on creativity, if you're not spending time redoing and redoing and redoing.
Yeah, running around in loops. Yeah.
Who should be part of that process internally in the organization?
I think you can call together all of those key stakeholders, whether they are from purchasing or from engineering or R&D, right early on, right at the very, very, very beginning of the product launch sequence. Bring them together round the table, visualize for them exactly what the process is going to look like, what their responsibilities are, make them understand what the implications are if they miss a deadline, what the knock-on effects will be. Get them to nod and secure a commitment. Preferably bring some senior management people into the team so that you also get that commitment.
Yeah.
And I think that can be something of a game changer if you can get that cross-functional team. And then you, as the marketing manager, can be like the figurehead for that, but it still should be a multidisciplinary team. Meet often, meet frequently for short meetings, and make sure that a responsibility is across the organization.
I think it's interesting because I was thinking, why is that even a marketing manager's job? And it might not even be, but it has to be, because he's the final, like he or her is the guy, girl to go to when you're done with this. Like, last step of that process will be the marketing guy, and everybody will be pushing him. So making sure, I think you mentioned it to begin with, making sure that you put different people in play.
Yeah, precisely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense. I think that makes sense. I know that we have experienced some changes during this pandemic thing, and we won't dive into specific on pandemic things, but can we see anything changes in general for the future on this regarding product launches, digitalization? Have you learned anything?
I think that as with any other crisis, it kind of forces all of us and brands as well to think in new directions. It's very clear that the brands that were already on board embracing 3D digitalization, they had really one step ahead. They were way ahead of their competitors because they could just shift to a larger gear rapidly. But those of the brands that were in panic mode, trying to be finding a pretty fast solution, we could tell that it actually was very helpful for them to think in 3D digitalization. It could be a cancelled photo shoot because there were no airplane.
Yeah, of course.
And by thinking in digital alternatives, you'll actually realize that there are great possibilities. The same with the trade shows as well.
And I guess that it's not possible, let's say last year, to go to Spain, fly in a lot of products, setting up a whole villa with different setup and lighting and styling and everything else. Could you like one-to-one change that into a digital thing?
Definitely, and that's basically what we as a company have been doing for more than 25 years. So there are definitely possibilities, exactly the same possibilities, but actually a lot more.
Okay.
Because there are so many synergies once you start to embrace 3D digitalization.
All right. So if your product launch consists of, let's say, a whole range of products within, it could be glasses or plates or whatever, like you will bring that to a location. You don't have to do that. Going more digital into this, you could just set up that.
I would argue that we participate in plus hundreds of product launches every year that has nothing to do with traditional photo or film at all, or any physical products, just based on pure 3D digitalization. So definitely there's a lot of options here.
All right. I think that's interesting as well. Can you use that digitalization? You talked about the organization. Can you use that as part of the launch, or is it just for assets that goes out afterwards? Like, do you, now that we've gathered everyone at the table, they've given their commitment, any changes, any maybe not even changes, but just, like stuff that might be relevant to do?
I would say film as a medium is a perfect example on how to generate some content for the product launch that can be used in the first place for the internal launch to actually ensure that the whole organization and the sales force or the dealers, they actually really understand the product and all of its value propositions. And the exact same film will then be reused for the go live official launch. So that's just an example of thinking in visual communication will ensure that everybody is on board and really design this controlled storytelling.
Yeah.
I think that is so important. I think that I would really emphasize the importance of when you're launching a product that you have the right sequence of events. And what I mean by that is you need to launch in the right order. So the first people you need to get on board are your own internal stakeholders. Once the product is ready to be, once your sales team are ready to be trained up, so the internal training for your sales team, get them fully on board. The second part will be your partners, your dealers or your distributors. They need to have knowledge of the product before you address the consumers, the public. And I think that one of the things that can really help to kind of help with internal training is some good content. And certainly if you want to get like commitment from your partners, your dealers, distributors to really buy into the concept, having a rich package of content as a preview so you can show them what is coming up in terms of marketing assets. If you can show them this huge tsunami of marketing that's going to happen, that really kind of helps people commit.
And I think that's interesting because you're, just a second, I think you're constantly going back to that organization thing. And I keep thinking, do people from the very beginning know about the right USPs, or how does that work? Like, I guess there must be USPs to the product since you're creating the product from the very beginning, but often they're not. Yeah, hopefully you would be surprised, but often that won't translate all the way down to marketing until the very end. But it sounds like that's the wrong way to do it.
I think in an ideal scenario, marketing would be involved right at the very beginning in helping to map those USPs.
Okay.
So that those USPs would be expressed right at the beginning.
Yeah.
They would be incorporated into the entire product, and of course they would be articulated at the very end.
All right.
And I think an important note in order to, when you talk about the right sequences and having the sales force and distributors on board, I think that working digitally, creating the content using 3D technology, you will actually have some opportunities to, at a really early stage, before the internal launch, you would actually be able to visualize the product. You will actually be able to combine that with some of the marketing content. You will be able to go out, let's say you pick the top 10 dealers or top 10 of your sales force and actually go out and prototype.
Prototype.
It's kind of it's framed from the innovation processes where you go out at an early stage and use a prototype to actually gather some important feedback.
Got it. So it's actually
being able to go back and
even before you have the physical prototype, you have a digital prototype. That's what you're saying, like before the actual. Okay, got it.
Then you'll gather some really important feedback, and at the same time, you will have a really high level of involvement from your most important part of the sales team or the dealers. And
they would either say, that's a shitty product, we'll never be able to sell that, and then you have to go back and probably do some fine adjustment either in your communication.
You have some opportunities to do some final tweaks.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense. And if they are in love with the product already, I guess you have, as you're mentioning, you have someone on board with you from the very beginning.
Exactly.
And of course that would cause issues if your products are delayed, because then you have nothing to show. So it kind of, that makes perfectly sense, I think. Okay, yeah, I get that. I think it sounds like we have less constraints on moving into a digital world, but are there any downsides to doing digital? Is it just like all good? Is the price the same?
In often cases, yeah, it is. But I think that if you really embrace 3D digitalization, you will experience that there's so much synergy, because everything around this is actually based on a simple 3D model, a 3D representation of the product, of the physical product.
Yeah.
So once you have that virtual product, so to speak, you can actually go in every direction.
Yeah.
So you can design the product imagery, you can design lifestyle imagery, you can design the product film, or even go further and design these interactive sales tools. It could be a digital showroom. All of that is actually based on a virtual representation of the product. And when you do that, you'll realize that then it's not one-to-one on the economy, then you'll actually be able to save a lot of money, but not least save time.
Yeah, of course.
I think that's the most important part here when we talk product launches, because that time is the issue often, right?
All right. So now we've established some sort of a committee, I would say, that's doing product launches. You are informing sales and dealers, am I right? Customers as well. And you have something to show them more than just words and a concept. You might actually have them some digital assets you can show. What would be next? Marketing's job is to, what's next in this process for the actual launch?
Well, I think you have to have defined exactly which assets you want to release to the market.
Yeah.
So then that can be a mountain of different things, from brochures and point of sales materials and videos and social media packages. But again, going back to what I was saying earlier, what I find can be really useful is if you have prepped these marketing materials as early as you can in the process. First of all, because when you can use it, as Runa was saying, to train your sales team, but also when you show them that sneak peek of those marketing materials, it really builds excitement and it wins their commitment. Then when you go to your dealers and you do the same thing and you show them, look, we really have this massive marketing coming your way, that really helps build their confidence and get them to commit and buy into your concept.
So it serves a bigger purpose than just launching on the actual day. What you're saying
Absolutely.
is that launch should happening earlier as well.
Absolutely. And increasingly, especially with digital dealers today, they need to have plenty of time, because they have their own schedules and their own calendars, and they need to have access to these marketing assets, the content, social media packages, imagery, pack shots. They need to have access to that early on, so they can program that into their own calendar, so that they can be with you on the go live date.
And that leads me to, I think, an interesting question that unfortunately I didn't come up with, but John from Dynaudio is asking, how do we move from these tangible things where you could feel the product, you could sit in it if it's a couch obviously or something else, going into digital where you could track everything, you can move it around? Is that, I guess, as humans we might miss something? Thoughts on that?
Yeah, basically I believe it's about adding more content to the experience. So it's not about having the same product image just online instead of in a brochure. You need to add those extra elements, because when we know that around 80% of the buying process happens online alone in front of my computer, without talking to any sales rep or anything like that, I need to come to a point where I'm very comfortable buying this product. And that's why we can also see that the retailers are starting to put recommendations or even requirements on what content to deliver. It's not about a single pack shot anymore. It's about several pack shots from every angle. It's about showing the features in a really visual way. It's about adding product films, because I need, as a consumer, to be very confident before I actually push the buy button.
And I guess you can buy everything online now. Like it's not. I remember saying that you can't buy things more than 1,000 kroner online. And look at me, I'm 45, so that has definitely been way back, right? But I guess you can buy anything online now. So are there any constraints in that? Is it the big platforms?
I think the best example is that now we can tell that pre-used cars, pre-owned cars are being sold online. And I think that's the most scary thing to buy, even though you stand right next to the dealer and you have test drive driven it. So I think that when you can buy a pre-owned car online, you can definitely buy a brand new product with the guarantee and even return right and so on.
Right. So if you want to buy a used car online, you could buy everything, I guess.
But I think it's about embracing the digital opportunities. For example, if it's a physical product, like within the furniture segment, augmented reality is a great opportunity to actually have that extra element. For those of you who are not aware of the capabilities of AR, it's actually when you sit and browse and you configure your specific product. It could be a dining chair. You can actually just click directly on the smartphone, view in AR, no complex app download needed anymore. You can actually, within the browser, place the product using the camera on the smartphone, and you will actually be able to see it in one-to-one scale. You can move it around and actually be able to see if it fits in.
All right. And I guess, obviously, that requires that the product initially is in 3D already.
That's the starting point.
Yeah. But that's the flexibility we were talking about before. Like, down the road, you will save money, because as soon as you look at this digital direction, you have the opportunities.
Exactly.
So launching products, when do people often do that? My experience is it's at shows.
It can traditionally very much has been, driven by trade shows or events. But of course, the pandemic showed us there was an alternative way to launch products.
Yeah.
And we're not exactly certain whether the trade show will ever come back to quite the same level. Of course, it serves a purpose. You can do things at trade shows that you can't necessarily with other formats. There's a socialization aspect. Yeah. But I think that we are now more free to launch in different formats. For example, digitally.
Okay. And I think that I have a feeling that shows might come back in some form. As you mentioned, I think that having that digital part of it will make it more worldwide. But one of the issues that might come into this is that maybe you can deliver product for the whole world at the same, like you are launching in North America first, and then Europe, and then wherever region it might be in Asia.
I think it's very normal to have to regionalize your product launches. There can be all kinds of reasons for that. You might be launching a summer product in Europe when it is winter in Australia, for example.
Good point. So, of course,
I think that it's perfectly okay to have. I think ideally you want 4 or 5 launch slots throughout the year.
All right.
Where
for the same product?
No, not for the same product, but so that you're not constantly launching products whenever you want, but you organize your program so that any launches that you might have will fit into certain slots around the year, where you will gather your sales team for training, and then subsequently you will release the product on particular days.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense. And I also think that having those slots you don't have to commit for specific shows, because it's quite expensive to go to shows. A lot of resources and energies and money goes into...
It is a huge part of most traditional marketing budgets, for sure. Yeah. And that's really been very interesting to watch how people have been very creative at transferring the trade show budget into other activities.
Yeah. And I think it's quite exciting, because when the fairs suddenly were cancelled, a lot went into panic mode. We need to find a digital alternative, and it needs to go fast. Yeah. And I think that my experience is that a lot of brands, they thought that it was kind of a half-hearted solution, half-hearted replacement of the real deal, the physical trade show. And then suddenly people got surprised, because of course it's not the relationship building environment as a physical trade show can be, but the digital solution offers so many possibilities. You can add so much more content. You can make it a lead generating sales tool. Yeah. You can add live talks. We've seen examples doing that. You can add webinars. You can add interactive product engagement. You can.
This could be us launching a product, right?
In essence,
as part of that platform where my dealers have access to, we could be launching that product.
And last but not least, it's not only 3 days a year as with the traditional trade show. It's actually happening all year around, 24/7. Right. So you actually see that. I believe, of course, that the physical trade shows will return to some extent. I agree, but I believe that we'll see that the clever brands, they will strategically combine these two worlds and kind of generate an omni-channel experience that will totally smash it.
Yeah. So you could go to the show, you could see it, touch the product, and get that human interaction, ask questions, do training, have a common understanding of what is it that we're saying, and afterwards you'll have a complete platform that you could continue that training on.
Precisely.
And those of the dealers or those of the customers who won't be able or won't prioritize going to the fair going forward, they'll be able to use the digital solution.
Of course.
Just as well as the internal training, as we talked about.
And they might do their own small internal training. I guess that they don't have to go to a show where everybody goes. They can just...
So I think it's not either or. It's a matter of combining, doing these hybrid solutions going forward.
Can I just come back to the region question? Because actually Sibyl Hanke from SKF asked, what would it look like if we have a specific product launched in Q3, that's where we are now, in 2021, in Germany, as an example, could be Austria as well. And right next to it, with Italy, they're not ready. The sales organization is not ready yet, so they will be launching in Q1. Any issues? Is that like?
I think it's not an ideal situation because Europe is a single market, but of course there will be often the need to regionalize for various reasons.
Yeah.
But I think that as much as possible, try to consolidate your launches in those kind of time slots that I was talking about, maybe sort of 4 or 5 windows of opportunity for launching.
All right. And I guess that if, at least within Europe, like if you have products available in Germany and they're not available in Italy, Italians will probably just buy it from Germany, I guess.
Well, yeah, you can't hide it, can you?
No.
No, exactly. Like the digital platforms will either you have to have specific country-specific digital platforms. There's a huge task as well, and it's costly as well. And then you can launch for that specific country, but that's not how the world works today, I guess.
I think you can just see the increase of e-commerce everywhere. So I think that you buy where it's available.
Yeah.
Basically.
Like, okay. Yeah, where you get the great experience and you buy where it's available. I think that makes perfectly sense. Another thing that I know that we had a question about, and it's still this physical digital world. Will people in the future still be going to physical stores? This is a question coming from Andre. Going to physical stores now that all the digital world is available, people buy online. Is it either or?
It's not either or. I think that what has surprised everyone, every year that goes by, we're surprised at the extent to which people become comfortable buying online. And it's no different, for example, in the furniture industry, where we have seen an enormous transition from brick and mortar retail to online e-tail. So I mean, sales have probably doubled through online channels throughout the Corona period. So you have to kind of embrace that. It is here to stay. However, it is more complicated than that because many of the online dealers have actually started to open physical stores as well, because they realize that there is a need to get close up with products, to feel and to sit and to experience up close. And likewise, some of the best physical dealers, brick and mortar dealers, have also been very successful converting a portion of their sales online onto their web platforms.
And I think that totally emphasizes the point here about it's not either or. You have to think both digitally and physically, because that specific e-tailer opening up a physical store, they simply won't be able to show the entire product range in that physical store. They will only be able to show a minimum. But they might be able to show that specific couch in one upholstery option, even though you can combine it in 300. And you can change the legs and whatever. So in that physical store, you still need to have a digital tool being able to visualize to the consumer how will it look like in that specific upholstery,
all right,
with those specific legs or in that specific combination.
So you go to the physical store, you see the dimension, you touch and feel and sit and whatever, and then you go to, it might be a big touchscreen, whatever, where you can configure your product. And I guess that goes across different
and you might go home, evaluate, and then you buy it online.
Of course. With this discount code from the sales guy who he still wants his extra money for selling it specifically to you. Okay, that makes perfect sense. The trend in this, will we come back to, like, have we peaked? Have the hype peaked in online sales? Are we just getting started? Will we see more physical stores? It's also a religious question, I would say, because some people are like, we want even more service and we want even more experience in the physical stores.
I think it's too hard to say exactly how it will happen, but I think that, as I said, with each year that goes by, we're all surprised at just how willing we are to purchase goods online. I think that what the physical store can do really well is provide services, perhaps design consultancy services, and perhaps help the client really customize the furniture, for example, and get a really kind of special experience.
Okay.
And it's again about this buying process. When you can take it to the first 80% online, then when you actually spend time going to the physical store, then you also have higher expectations. Because I don't just want to go to the physical store and experience the same as I could online on my own. So I actually expect an educated sales rep to be able to consult me, just as you tell.
Yeah.
So I think it puts more demands to the staff in the stores, for example.
And that's interesting. It's a different talk, and we actually had it a bit earlier, but I think it's interesting that that's your expectations as a consumer going into a store. But what actually happens is that brick and mortar stores are going down, so that you don't put well-educated people in the store. It's student assistants.
Yep.
They're starting to being a doctor and then have a part-time job selling couches. And obviously that won't give you that 100% experience down in the store.
But I think the brand can play a role there by providing very high-quality sales tools that can be executed within the store environment.
Yeah, definitely a challenge. While I remember it, Peter from Lifetime Kids Room, he asked, VR, AR, should we believe the hype? Like, is it a hype? Should we go for it? Have we peaked? What are the trends here? What's your experience? You worked a lot with it. You have a lot of clients coming in saying, this is what we want. What do you normally tell people?
I think we should deal with AR and VR separately, but what they have related to each other is that, as with any other technology, it's about using it in the right context. Let's start with the VR, virtual reality. I've seen really bad execution during the last 10 years, but I've also witnessed really executions where you can really create a immersive experience. For example, on a trade show, where you can be standing in a really authentic environment. You can really play and interact with the product in a way that you will never be able to do without this VR headset. So I think it needs to be in a controlled environment with some technical staff being able to actually help and guide you. With AR, augmented reality, I think that, again, in the right context. If you use it, for example, in the furniture example, I believe it adds value to the consumer being able to actually see the physical product placed in my own living room.
And to add to that, I just checked yesterday the new iPhone. What does it look like? So I bring up this AR model and I put it on the table, and then I can walk around with it. So,
And I think with AR, it's a really interesting development, because just some years ago, it was a really complex development. You needed to develop native apps to iOS and Android and even Windows Phone. And it was a huge cost for the brands, and they were hardly finalizing developing them. Then they needed to actually update them, because anytime there comes a new software, we need to update and so on. So it was a huge investment. But now it's actually happening, as we talked about earlier, just in browser. No app needed. You just click and it just opens up. So I think that's some of the technology developing that would also help make it more user-friendly.
Okay, and I guess it could play a part in product launches as well, like especially if you have to train your sales people or dealers. And then again, you have to remember that VR, I think it's really an immersive experience. You have to remember that you need glasses, like you need this headset in order for it to work. And you can't just ship your browser with a pair of glasses. Like
but again, with AR, in the previous versions, you need to scale the product on your own, which means that it was useless, because you didn't know the actual dimensions. But now, with the new camera technologies, it just happens automatically. So boom, the sofa is here in the actual dimensions.
Yeah, good. I think that answers the questions. That question is that it sounds like it's the right tool for the right occasion, but it's not a silver bullet.
No, and having said everything here, there is still a lot of hype. So you need to bring it down to kind of what kind of value does it add to my specific product launch.
All right.
But it can play an important
role. I think it could be, let me know if you guys have the numbers, I definitely don't. Could be interesting to know how many people actually use those AR. Is it because we're technology driven, we know what it is, and a lot of other people don't? That would be interesting to look into. One other thing before I would like to kind of sum up or maybe take a couple of questions in if anybody asks. If you by the way, if you have questions and you haven't asked them yet, there is a chat function where you watch this. We will all the time look at them and try to do something about it. What I would like to know is a bit about budget. It's of course we can't go into how much budget do I need to launch a product. Totally depends on if you're launching an airplane series or if it's just a couple of glasses. How do you split that budget? Where would you, do you have any guidance on, some should be percentage maybe on, put money aside for that internal investment that you're talking about. Put money aside for the actual launch, put money aside for media. Is there a percentage to it that you would like, I would maybe put it like this, or is that like never going to happen?
I personally wouldn't be able to dare to put any specific numbers to it. I think it's, I think everyone's situations are so unique.
Yeah.
Depending on the industry, depending on the type of launch, it can influence that in so many different directions. I think it would be so difficult to pin anything down.
Yeah.
But one thing I would say is that, at least when it comes to planning your product launches, you need to start your planning as early as possible.
Okay.
So, at least 6 months before your product launch, you need to have gathered your product launch team, your cross-functional product launch team.
All right.
And preferably even 9 months or even 12 months before the actual launch.
And that might even give you sort of a plan where you could see where your budget will go and what time. Coming time, that might actually give you that percentage of, okay, this is the amount of money set aside to this specific launch.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And without adding any percentage or figures in total, I would say that thinking in 3D digitalization, you will gain a lot of reuse possibilities, because you will be able to reuse digital assets that was developed for the last product launch to the new one. So you'll definitely see that there is potential to save money going forward.
All right. And it sounds like the more assets you've got, the more leverage you got with your dealers and your sales, and obviously the general customer.
But I would never recommend to lower the budget, because I would then use it on those extra content that would make the experience even better.
Of course you wouldn't. Of course you wouldn't, Rune. I was thinking one of the experiences I personally had is that always make sure that you have enough money for distribution. Like, I think it's not, I wouldn't say that it's often overlooked, but I would say that if you invested a lot of content, whether it's actual video or actual product photos or 3D product photos, whatever it is, make sure that people sees it. Of course, it's important to get sales on board, but also have enough money to distribute it.
Absolutely. And also, another tendency that sometimes we have is you're so relieved to get day one of the product launch, your go live date, over and done with, that you sometimes don't program in enough recurring activities to amplify the message and to reach more of your target consumers. So that's also really important, is that it's not just a one-shot occasion, but that it's actually spread out over a campaign period.
All right.
And it's actually a tendency we see that it's going from this one big bang and it being transformed into kind of a continuous flow of content creation. Because that's the way 3D digitalization works. We don't need a one big bang. We can actually just open up 10 times a year and create some small content.
If we are to sum up, I think on the topic of product launches, I think one of the key stuff here is actually you could do proper product launches without buying any services that we have, and I think that's an important giveaway as well. That said, it gives you it take away a lot of that restraints that you would normally have. If we are to sum up on this before maybe taking some of the questions that might be there, organize yourself. Yeah,
organize yourself. Organize yourself in the right way.
Yeah.
Create a cross-functional team that takes full ownership of the product launch.
All right, and the marketing manager will be the owner of that process.
Indeed.
Indeed, got it. Embrace digital.
Yeah, it's about understanding the possibilities that lies just ahead of you.
Yeah.
You will experience the synergies, and then time will be the time saving will be your ally here.
I guess it's much easier to overcome those delays that might come from transportation, supply chain, whatever might be the product changes if you've embraced digital from the very beginning.
Definitely.
Sequence, like I guess it's very important in what way that you launch your product.
Yeah, don't overlook the importance of launching it successfully to your sales team first. Get them fully on board, fully excited. Then move over to your dealers, your partners, your distributors, and only then should you be going live to the public consumer.
And just to add to that, I guess that if you're in very short time, you might bypass your dealers and salespeople and then go direct to consumers, because then you can say we launched on time.
That I think would be a miscalculation.
Yeah, that would be wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, got it. Number 4, getting comfortable with e-commerce. I can hear that the different platforms out there, they are asking, they're demanding assets. So definitely that should be part of a launch strategy as well.
Again, understanding the buying process, embracing the digital opportunities, and add that extra content to make it comfortable.
All right. From a very, very early stage, get feedback from sales. I think that was the point as well. And make sure that that feedback is feeded back to the actual product owner so they can either adjust or make sure that the communication is a bit different than it was before. Got it. And then if you're not the champ in doing product launches already, are you doomed? Or like, how do you get started on this? It sounds like...
I would say you're not doomed. You're a noble company. I think a lot of product launches go wrong. You know, I think as much as 50% of product launches are delayed and don't come out on time. So I think what is critical is that you see it as a learning experience, so that you're able to reevaluate each time and say, okay, well, things went well. There are things that we could improve. What can we improve? How do we get better? And I think one of the joys of launching products is that you do have that opportunity to improve and to get better. And that really is a great feeling.
All right. So there's hope for everybody out there.
Yeah, I believe.
Okay, let me see any specific questions that we might have here. I've got one. Do you have any advice if you sense that your recent launch didn't get the reception in the market that you had expected? How do we help it back on the right path for success?
Oh, I think it is a little bit back to what we said. You know, all is not doomed if it doesn't. You know, it's not just about the first day.
All right.
You know, you do have the ability, especially in the digital world, where you have more flexibility, and you can maybe make tweaks to certain things that didn't quite land the way you had expected.
Okay.
In other words, if you are relying on a physical location shooting at Bali, and that went wrong, and you realize that 3 months later, it would be quite expensive to do that over again.
Yeah, of course.
But working digitally, it's basically about opening up the scenes on the computer, tweaking, and then outputting the new edition. So again, the reuse possibilities will really help you, the flexibility around 3D digitalization.
And if you want to go if you don't want to go to Bali, who wouldn't?
It would be nice.
So could you say something less exotic? No, if you don't want to go to Bali because of constraints, money, budget, whatever, it could even be sustainability. You don't want to. That's quite heavy on that account. How much time do you need? How much time should you put in? That's an actual question as well. In order for this process, like normally you would plan going to Bali, product, you would set some time aside to that.
Do you mean creating the content digitally?
Yeah. How much time should, in the plan that Jess is talking about, sequence?
I think that would be very dependent on what kind of content we are talking about. If we talk product imagery and lifestyle imagery, it can be from 3 weeks to a couple of months.
Okay.
Depending on the volume, of course.
All right.
But I think what's important is that at the same time we will actually be able to develop all of these digital tools based on the same 3D model. So it's not like you have to do the location shooting at first and then you can move on to something else. You can actually work at the same processes at the same time.
Yeah. And I think that 2 months sounds super reasonable. Like that's not urgent. If you have a plan knowing that this is when we will start briefing your agency that you work with, and then 2 months later I will have a complete set of assets that I can go back and tweak if needed. That's definitely a great answer to that question. I feel like I want to answer this question, but I won't. But we talked about video is great for launching products, of course, internally and everything else. And I know recently we've done a video for a product launch, a Norwegian company doing, I'm not sure what the name is, Røros. Yeah. Could you elaborate on that? Whoever asked that question, we'll definitely send you a link afterwards so you can see what it is.
What I think is key to that project is that we were originally briefed to create a single video, you know, a longer kind of product demonstration video, and we get a lot of requests for that. But I think what was really cool about the project is that once we worked with the client more closely and we dug into the brief, we found out that we could actually make not just a single video, but we could cut down that video into little micro segments, little shorter videos that we could then kind of spin out on all these different marketing channels. So what started as a kind of a film that you could use maybe to for your sales presentation ended up being an entire archive of video assets that you could spin out across Instagram and Facebook and web pages.
And I guess that was for different target audiences as well?
It could be for different target audiences, it could be to extend the campaign period, it could be to emphasize different messaging for different audiences. Right. But the bottom line is that you're making your assets go further. You're getting more for your money.
You would also be able to localize it for individual markets, kind of twist it visually based on the same master content, so to speak.
Well, what's the English word for that specific product? Do you know?
It's one of these kitchen hoods, ventilation hoods.
Yeah, all right, got it. Yeah, that was it. So, and they often, they would obviously have different target audiences. Like that could be the dealer who needs to understand what does this specific thing do. On the other hand, there might be someone from the family wanting to know how does this look in my kitchen.
Absolutely, but also because, you know, as Rune was saying before, you know, you have a buying process, and people need to come back to the concept several times. So they may need an initial message, a teaser that kind of blows them away, and they're interested, they're aware, but they may have questions, and so you can serve up different types of content that can kind of like reel your customer in gradually.
Yeah, and I think again, film as a media. The pandemic only pushed even more to the trend, people watching film, and there's a direct line between showing film and also having explainer videos to the point where you actually buy the product. All statistics show that.
That there's actually something to it. Okay. Now that we created assets, if you want to onboard your sales, and this question is, if you want to onboard your sales or whoever might be, you know, participating in having this product launched, what is the right medium? Is PowerPoint still a thing?
For the sales training?
Could be for let's say marketing 1-2% concept and ideas and visuals and assets. Any preferred? I'm not sure there's a right or wrong answer to this question. More like from your experience.
I think that I think one of the things that we've been impressed by is actually how, you know, the Teams meeting, the Teams or the Zoom format. It was awkward in the beginning, wasn't it? When we were trying to learn how to use Teams and Zoom, but then we got quite good at it, and then we discovered that there are certain advantages. One of them is that you can have a lot of people on the call, and you can gather a lot of people together, and you can kind of introduce a number of different speakers or specialists that would normally be too expensive to kind of fly over to a single location.
Okay.
So I think that, you know, a digital presentation can work very well with a combination of maybe some slides, maybe some talk, maybe some film. Yeah.
That's exactly what I'm hearing, is that it's a combination of different, but again, going digital on this. Good stuff. I think one last thing that I want to say is that it sounds like content is definitely going to change the game. We've been saying that for many years, but now we're back to actual, you know, not just fluffy marketing content, but actual representations of your product and the way you can experience that. It's going to be a differentiator.
Definitely.
Good. Anything you guys want to add?
No, I think that, as you said, the content is key, because when you are in a digital scenario, we need to find ways to bridge the distance, to bridge the gap. So, you know, the more engaging content you can produce, the safer your customer feels to committing.
Makes sense. Oh, good. With that said, I think that we're done for today. After the show, for those of you who have been signing up, if you haven't, please do so. You can do it every on our channels. We will see the comments that you write to us. We will send you the key takeaways. Yes. We actually made a template where you have your own kind of small way of planning tool. It might not be into details, but it'll give you an overview of what needs to be done. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed it.
Thanks very much.
And thank you guys for tuning in. Appreciate it.